Discover how the delivery girl amazingly exposed 9 programmers, transforming their lives forever. Emily adjusted her cap as she parked her bike outside the glossy Macrotech building. Late shifts were exhausting, but the night air was crisp, and the tinged smell of coffee filled her senses. She had maps in her mind, routes to memory, packages to deliver. Yet, tonight felt different. Glancing through the tinted glass, she caught a glimpse of a cluster of programmers bent low over their lunch, their heads huddled together in shared frustration. A pang of empathy gripped her heart. These 8 faceless figures seemed to mirror her own struggles, silent, overshadowed by a world that didn't see them. Delivering packages during the nights was an escape, a tether to something larger than herself. She misplaced it in her aspirations, graphic design, and long-forgotten ambitions wrapped in the richness of classes she didn't complete. Yet here she was, pouring her heart into others while just outside the borders of Maplewood. The shiny tech industry buzzed with possibilities. Each time she dropped off a package, unease churned in her stomach, nodding tighter as she saw the expressions on those programmers' faces, a blend of camaraderie and desperation that pulled at her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into a blur as Emily balanced her late-night deliveries with caring for her ailing grandmother, her thoughts constantly oscillating between responsibility and unfulfilled dreams. Yet, every time she rolled past the marble facade of Macrotech, the whisper of ambition intertwined with her dread. The weight of expectation grew heavier each day. It was impossible to ignore the flickers of ambition igniting within her. But what could a delivery girl change? Each breath felt like a battle against the looming question: dare she step into the world of the elite to fight for those who weren't even acknowledged? And then came the product launch, chaos unfurling before her very eyes. The buzz of excitement collided with an unexpected crash as a major tech glitch unveiled the coding discrepancies no one wanted to acknowledge. Horror waved through the building, and suddenly Emily felt the urgent pull of belonging, a realization that she had stumbled onto something significant. A line drawn in the sand between those who held power and those who had dreams. Their truths entwined. Her heart raced as she contemplated the risk of exposing injustices while needing her job to support her family. Torn between safety and obligation, she froze, each revelation weighing heavily, pulling her deeper into this web of complexity. Would she sacrifice her stability for the sake of an unrecognized team? What if her actions hurt the very people she had grown to respect? In that moment, doubt clawed at her insides. Could she truly find the strength to shoulder their dreams? The tension coiled around her like a vice, leaving no room for peace. The programmers' faces, so familiar now, haunted her thoughts. Could she abandon them when they needed a voice? The air vibrated with unexpressed potential, an uncharted territory laced with danger and hope, beckoning her to take one critical step. The growing anguish nearly suffocated her. Could she embrace this role as their advocate, or was she merely sticking her hands into fire? The clock was ticking, and as her choices loomed ahead, the question echoed within her mind: what was she willing to sacrifice for change? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on Emily, each tick of the clock sharpening her mind, pushing her toward a decision. The evenings spent on her bike had once felt like an escape, but now they had morphed into a battleground of conscience. Should she step from the shadows and become a catalyst for change, or remain among the faceless, delivering packages without ever revealing who she might become? That night, as she sat at her kitchen table, dimly lit by a single bulb, the shadows of past ambitions loomed large. She ran her fingers over the sketches she had made long ago, flashes of creativity bursting on the pages, but never thriving. If only she had pushed herself, had dedicated more time to hone her talents. Now, the idea of using her voice to bring attention to the plight of the programmers stirred a dormant fire inside her, but fear of failure wielded greater power. Moments later, determined but still uneasy, she pulled out her phone. The darkened screen reflected her conflicted spirit, a picture shared in a digital realm. The comments from her followers and critics, alike forming a barrier she hesitated to cross. She grasped the phone tightly, debating whether to post her thoughts on the launch, possibly calling out what she had witnessed. But each attempt fell apart as anxiety clouded her judgment. Did she truly have the authority to share their stories? To expose a truth that could jeopardize her livelihood? She took a deep breath, the air tasting of resolve. It was just a matter of finding the right approach. That was when an idea began to surface through the layers of doubt, taking form with each inhale. She envisioned a blog, an anonymous platform to articulate her insights and share the struggles of the programmers instead of a full-blown exposé that could trigger a backlash. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, a rush of excitement colliding with fear as she entertained the vision of connecting with others through her words, revealing the human side of the tech industry that hid behind the corporate veneer. But with every plan came countless questions. How could she do this without exposing herself? How could she establish credibility, especially when she was on the lower rung of the industry ladder? And what if the programmers she empathized with faced repercussions because of her? The battle raged on, a constant push and pull between hope and skepticism as days passed. Her focus sharpened. Balancing work and family obligations was a tightrope, yet every interaction with the programmers gave her fresh resolve. She observed their camaraderie, the way they rallied around each other during the glitches. Their passion was infectious. Fueling her inner strength was an undeniable truth: they needed someone to champion their cause, and she was willing to be that voice, even if it started small and under the veil of anonymity. With determination solidifying her resolve, she finally drafted her first post. Words flowed like a current washed over by confessions and aspirations. Emily poured her heart into detailing the pressure these programmers faced, the pressures that stifled their creativity and dampened their hopes. As she clicked publish, an electric thrill surged within her. With that single action, she felt a shift, the beginning of a journey to reclaim her own narrative, weaving her dreams with theirs, playing a crucial role in the unfolding drama of their lives. But as the notification of a new comment flooded in, a seed of doubt began to sprout. Would her endeavor be one of liberation, or would it set in motion events she hadn't anticipated? The line between advocacy and danger blurred once more. Emily leaned closer to the screen, her heart pounding violently in her chest. What would she confront next? Emily woke the next morning, her heart still racing from a restless night filled with thoughts of her recent post. The digital world had a way of amplifying everything, she reminded herself, and as she opened her laptop, an overwhelming sense of vulnerability washed over her. She had chosen to use her voice, to step into the light, and now she had to confront the consequences. The first comment she saw was one of concern, echoing her own fears. "What if they find out who you are?" it read. Doubt gnawed at her stomach, but another comment quickly followed. "Thank you for speaking up." It ignited a glimmer of hope within her. Here was proof that her words were resonating. Someone needed to hear this message, so maybe she was on the right path. For the next few days, Emily dedicated herself to this parallel life she was building. She carefully navigated her responsibilities as a delivery package worker while diving deeper into the tech world under her anonymous guise. The stark contrast of her two lives, the thrill of being a whispering advocate and the monotony of her daily job, created an internal tension that both frightened and exhilarated her. As comments began to accumulate on her blog, so did inspiration. Emily found herself engrossed in conversations with individuals who were passionate about software development, people who felt suffocated by corporate expectations. She spent her evenings reaching out to programmers willing to share their stories, crafting a narrative woven from her own insights and their experiences. It was liberating. Her creativity surged forth like a waterfall, ideas flowing that had once been dammed by self-doubt. Email exchanges morphed into conversations that sparked new thoughts. Each interaction chipped away at Emily's insecurities, revealing a growing sense of identity, a woman who embraced vulnerability and courageously stepped into the unknown. Her personal growth wasn't limited to her writing. She realized she was subconsciously learning from the programmers, adopting their resilience and adaptability, connecting with a community that inspired her. But with newfound energy came new fears. The looming threat of exposure tugged at her dedication. Should she risk revealing her identity if it meant bringing more attention to their plight? Her mind raced with the potential repercussions of each decision. She longed for validation and clarity. Was she bold enough to embrace the reality of sharing her name alongside their stories? One evening, while sitting in her favorite coffee shop, the weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on her. She sipped her drink, gathering her courage, when a notification chimed. A direct message illuminated the screen, drawing her attention. It was a programmer, their words spilling into her thoughts. "I've been following your blog. You're fearless, and we need voices like yours to speak up. But this could change everything. Are you prepared for that?" Her reflections stirred a deeper urgency. Perhaps it was time to channel her passion into action, to confront the very people and systems that perpetuated the silence. Emily had begun to see herself as more than an observer. She was an advocate. Yet the question lingered. Was she ready to put herself on the line? That night she could hardly sleep. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as the idea of stepping outside her comfort zone took root. The thrill of what lay ahead began to drown out her fears. A potential confrontation with the corporate machinery that dictated so much of their lives. In that moment, a flicker of determination ignited her spirit. The time had come to face her fears head-on and summon the courage to be a part of a greater narrative. As she lay in bed, a single thought echoed in her mind, entwined with the desire to reclaim her own voice and those of her fellow programmers. Would she embrace the chaos that came with taking a stand? Her heart raced at the new possibilities ahead, each pulse resonating with the promise of change. She felt the tide shift within her as a wave of resolve swept over her. Nothing would be the same after this. The shadows of doubt lingered in the corners of her mind, but now they felt like ghosts of her past. With the dawn of a new day looming, Emily grasped onto the conviction that her journey was just beginning. What she did next could transform everything. The first light of dawn seeped through Emily's window, awakening not just her body but a renewed sense of purpose that had taken root in her spirit. Today felt different. As the sun illuminated her room, it also illuminated the path she had to take. Silence no longer echoed in her mind as doubts wrestled for dominance, replaced by a constant hum of determination. After fulfilling her package deliveries, each stop a mindless routine, Emily returned home, the weight of her anonymity heavy on her shoulders. She settled at her desk, hesitating just a moment before opening her laptop. Thoughts raced through her mind, each one urging her to embrace the challenge ahead. She had a choice: remain in safety or step boldly into the storm. That evening, she prepared to write a post that would push her boundaries further than ever. It would be an address to the programming community, a call to action infused with her personal insights entwined with the stories she had collected. The keyboard felt foreign beneath her fingers, each stroke a testament to her scars and aspirations. What she typed next was a blend of heart, hope, and a journey of despair that went beyond her OW. As the outline took shape, glimmers of anxiety stalked her thoughts. What if her name eclipsed the message? She had observed how vulnerable truths cut through pretense. But here lay a paradox. To open the door to authenticity meant confronting her fears of exposure. She couldn't afford to lose sight of the mission. The voices she intended to elevate deserved a platform, and hers was the vessel to carry them. The first draft flowed with raw emotion, but Emily's mind kept colliding with the specter of their potential backlash. Would revealing her identity overshadow the voices she sought to amplify? A part of her craved recognition not for her but for the cause she championed. Would she drown beneath the tsunami of her fears, or could she rise above? Late into the night, as darkness enveloped her surroundings, a sense of clarity emerged. Emily paused, the draft unfurling on her screen. The challenge had revealed a hidden resolve she had only just begun to tap into. No longer would she cower behind a mask. It was time to stand bold in the spotlight, to advocate relentlessly despite her fears. Amid this surge of confidence, a thought flickered, staring her straight in the face. What if she faced not only her public self but also the giants behind the corporate curtain? Could she reach out to the programmers whose stories mirrored her own and gather strength from shared experiences? With each realization, She mapped a plan in her mind. Armed with stories, she would create a series of live discussions and opportunity for programmers to voice their struggles, while she navigated her emerging role as a facilitator. There were risks each encounter could expose her to scrutiny, but Emily nurtured the belief that vulnerability was a catalyst for transformation. As she drifted to sleep that night, a weight lifted off her heart. The journey was hers to shape, and if her identity was to be at stake, it might as well become a beacon for others. Slipping beneath the fog of uncertainty, she imagined reaching out to 9 programmers who had inspired her. Together they could expose the obscured truths of their world, illuminating the untapped potentials drowning under oppression. Emily's breath hitched at the thought of resistance, but she reminded herself, discomfort was the crucible of change. Would she be able to gain the courage necessary to initiate these conversations? The prospect of diving into this uncharted territory both thrilled and terrified her. Waking the next morning, she felt the universe aligning at her back, whispering promises of change. Today, she knew that her next step could either build bridges or ignite flames that would blaze through the darkness of complacency. Could she muster the strength needed to challenge the forces that had silenced so many, laying bare the complexities of their struggle for the world to see? Emily sat at her desk, the faint glow of her laptop screen illuminating the resolve on her face. Today was pivotal. The day she would not just share her voice but also summon the voices of others. The task ahead felt monumental yet exhilarating. With a few deep breaths to anchor herself, she composed a message for each of the 9 programmers she intended to reach out to, each email tailored to resonate with their individual experiences. She closed her eyes briefly after drafting the templates, imagining the responses, some filled with excitement, others possibly tinged with skepticism. Doubt crept again into her mind. What if they felt threatened by her initiative? What if they deemed her unworthy of championing their causes? Emily forced herself to confront these thoughts head-on. They needed her, perhaps even more than she needed them. Opening her eyes, she began to type the first email, summoning memories of shared struggles she had come across in forums and social media. Your story has inspired me, and I believe it deserves to be heard, she wrote, the words practically pulsating with urgency. It was personal, revealing, and distinctly risky. Emily felt her heart race as she hit send, a rush of adrenaline ushering her into uncharted territory. As the day unraveled, one by one, she sent those 9 emails into the void. Each one felt like a weight lifted off her shoulders, yet she also felt the pressure mounting. What if no one replied? What if they didn't recognize the value of community dialogue she envisioned? She had opened her heart, inviting others into her plans, but the unpredictability of human response loomed large. That evening, a flood of notifications jolted her from her thoughts. She was startled at first, but soon felt her pulse quicken at the sight of her inbox responses, tangible evidence that she was not alone in this fight. Each reply unveiled varying degrees of vulnerability, acceptance, and gratitude. They were eager to share their stories, willing to invest in this uncertain venture. One particular message struck her as she read. Margot, an established programmer who had battled discrimination in her workplace, recounted her story with poignant honesty. Emily absorbed every word, realizing the impact this could have when articulated in front of a wider audience. Margot's experience mirrored her own struggles while forging a path in a male-dominated field, and she felt a sense of kinship. However, staring at her screen long after finishing Margot's email, Emily grappled with the inherent risks of vulnerability. Was her desire for transparency worth the potential backlash? Could diving into these narratives also unearth deeper wounds within herself? These questions spun heavy within her mind, insisting she confront them head-on. Determination propelled her to create a secure online space for their discussions, a platform where they could share openly without fear of persecution. She envisioned it as not merely a video series but a sanctuary for truth, strong enough to withstand professional scrutiny. The idea excited her, and yet an unsettling knot formed in her stomach as she contemplated hosting the first discussion. Would her hopeful intentions translate into something more significant? As dusk turned to night, Emily paced her room, contemplating the logistics of the live discussions. What questions would she pose? How could she ensure everyone felt valued and heard? In her quest to empower others, she realized there would be a learning curve and evolution she could only navigate through authentic engagement. Driven by newfound purpose, she sat back down, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she began drafting an outline for the first session. This was not only about showcasing wisdom, but also about creating a synergy of shared experiences, transforming fear into collective strength. With each bullet point she typed, she committed to not just revealing personal stories but also forging connections that would build resilience. Before shutting down for the night, she reflected on the looming challenge. Ahead, the real test would arrive with the first conversation, laying bare not only the struggles of those involved but also exposing her own vulnerabilities. It was time to make her decision. Would she remain the quiet observer, or would she step into the spotlight as a facilitator of hard conversations, setting an example for all those who had silenced their voices? Staring at her reflection in the laptop screen, Emily felt herself teetering on the precipice of change. The moment of truth was coming, and she could already hear its call echoing in the silence of her room. Emily awoke the next morning with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The outline she had crafted loomed over her like a weight, an amalgamation of hope and worry. Today was not just about choosing the right words. It was about shaping the narrative of her own journey alongside those of others. The sun streamed through her window, but for Emily, a cloud lingered in her mind. She wondered if she could guide the conversation effectively, or if she would falter under the pressure of facilitating such a significant gathering. Each person she invited brought their own unique history, palpable pain, and resilience. But how could she weave those diverse threads into a cohesive tapestry? As she brewed her coffee, she thought about Margot's story, a beacon of courage amidst the sea of doubt. That email had ignited something deep within her, an intense recognition of her own experience woven with another's. Yet, action was different from reflection. She had articulated a vision, but could she manifest it into reality? With renewed focus, she turned to her laptop and began to draft a series of questions designed to propel the conversation forward. What does vulnerability mean to you in the tech industry? Was the first, but there were others. How have you navigated challenges, both personal and professional? As each inquiry flowed onto the page, she found herself not only considering her guests' perspectives but embracing her own evolving narrative toward strength. Each question made her more aware of her role not merely as an organizer, but as a fellow traveler on this journey of healing. The deeper she delved into her thoughts, the clearer it became that her insecurities could also become touchstones for connection. Perhaps her doubts weren't obstacles but conduits. Sharing how she had grappled with imposter syndrome could liberate those who felt similarly trapped. Just as she prepared to tighten her outline, her phone buzzed a reminder of the meeting scheduled for that evening. A knot twisted in her stomach, amplifying the urgency of her preparations. With her heart racing, Emily engaged in a ritual she had relied upon since childhood: the mental rehearsal for a performance. She visualized the faces of her guests, imagined their stories filling the digital space, and saw herself steering the dialogues through the uncertainty. Her excitement surged, channeled into a confidence that pushed past her lingering self-doubt. Yet, an unsettling thought crept back. What if someone challenged her authority? What if someone called her out for not having faced as many obstacles? She could almost feel the weight of their scrutiny enveloping her like a suffocating blanket. Yet that very fear turned into fuel. Determined to maintain control and warmth in the session, she expanded her understanding of effective facilitation. Seeking insights from mentors and online resources, she crafted strategies that highlighted empathetic listening and led with curiosity. This would be an exchange, not a lecture. An opportunity for growth for everyone involved, including herself. As the day wore on, Emily felt her spirit lift, propelling her into a realm of readiness. Yet, as she glanced in the mirror before the call, she whispered to herself the question that lingered. Am I ready to wield both power and vulnerability seamlessly? The clock ticked closer to the session. She opened the digital platform, reviewing the logistics while steadying her breath for the flood of voices that would soon join her. Each click felt both ceremonious and terrifying, as she prepared to stand at the intersection of their stories and her own. But with every new connection being made on the topic thread, she also sensed confusion brewing. Amongst her guests was someone she did not anticipate, a long-serving colleague known for his harsh critiques. The moment she clicked join meeting, she knew the evening ahead would not just reveal stories but perhaps also her deepest fears. Would she be able to hold the space together, or would the night unravel around her? This was not merely about conversation. It was about authenticity and the willingness to expose oneself in the face of judgment. The true test lay ahead. As the virtual room filled up, Emily's grip on her notes tightened. The time had come to face her doubts, and she could already feel the weight of their collective stories pressing inward, not just against her resolve but on everything she believed possible. Emily could feel her heart racing as the meeting interface flickered to life, a parade of faces appearing in rows, each one a universe of experiences. With each hello and wave, the atmosphere began to take on a vibrancy she hadn't anticipated. Yet, despite the warmth permeating from her participants, tension coiled tightly in her stomach. She wondered if anyone could detect the fleeting tremors of fear hiding just beneath her surface as the last person logged on. Her colleague's gaze pierced through the screen with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Jack had always been a staunch critic, known for his ability to dissect arguments seamlessly, often leaving little room for error. As memories flooded in of past presentations where she had stumbled under his scrutiny, she knew this night would require more than just a carefully crafted agenda. It would demand authenticity and courage. "Welcome everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "I'm truly grateful you're here tonight. This space is for sharing about our vulnerabilities and strengths, the challenges we've faced and the triumphs we've earned." She chose each word carefully, feeling their weight like stones thrown into a pond, creating ripples of anticipation. Jack nodded but remained silent, his eyes narrowed critically, making it clear he was not there to make easy. Emily could hardly divert her attention from him. She introduced the first question with a shaky breath, focusing her energy on the chat that began to fill with responses. As she read through the messages, she forced herself to push through the discomfort. "What does vulnerability mean to you in the tech industry?" she prompted, glancing momentarily at Jack for any signs of critique. To her surprise, a participant named Nina dived in. "To me, vulnerability in tech means admitting that you don't know everything and asking for help. It's about being transparent with what I struggle with." A scattering of agreement emerged in the chat, and Emily felt her confidence building. It wasn't just a dialogue on individual experiences. It was blossoming into shared truths that held potential. She could sense everyone leaning in closer, eager to let their voices blend and flow together. As the conversation unfolded, Emily stepped into a role she hadn't expected, to assume a guide rather than just an organizer. She encouraged narratives of growth, weaving from one story to another. Margot's struggles and victories transformed into a shared experience, and Emily could feel the participants opening up like flowers to the sun. Jack's skepticism remained an undercurrent, threading through her thoughts until he finally spoke up. "I get that vulnerability's important, but some of us have fought harder battles than others. How do you address that?" The question hung in the air, an anchoring weight that settled on her shoulders. A wave of heat crept up Emily's neck. This was the moment she had dreaded, yet she felt her resolve harden. If she was going to claim her space, she had to stand tall amidst judgment. "Jack," she said, holding his gaze through the screen, "everyone's battles are unique, and I'm not here to quantify those experiences. What I do know is that sharing paths of vulnerability can create room for recognition and empathy." Her words were met with a short silence before Nina jumped in again. "Exactly. It's about fostering community despite differences in experience." The conversation swelled, and for the first time, Emily witnessed a shift. Jack's expression softened as others voiced agreement. As the night unfolded, deep connections formed, and Emily found herself reveling in the tapestry of shared experiences that arose. Stories of loss, confusion, growth filled the virtual air until something shifted within her, the realization that she wasn't there simply to guide others. She was leading herself through her own healing. Yet, as the meeting edged toward conclusion, Emily couldn't shake the lingering confidence shake that danced at the edges of her mind. Today had revealed strength she hadn't known she could reflect. However, doubts still flickered. Could she maintain this newfound voice, this courage in future endeavors? With a determined heart but a mind racing with questions, Emily signed off the meeting, her spirit alive with possibility, and pondered her next steps. Where would this newfound confidence lead her? As she stared into the digital void left behind, one thing was certain: this was just the beginning of her journey, and she was ready to explore the depths of her own narrative with renewed passion. But then came an unexpected email notification, the one that could alter everything she had just discovered. Emily's pulse quickened as she read the email subject line. Her curiosity piqued. The sender was a well-known industry publication, and as she clicked through, her heart sank and soared in rapid succession. The article detailed the success of a program aimed at empowering women in tech, featuring stories of 9 programmers who had overcome various challenges to achieve remarkable success. It connected their journeys, vulnerabilities, and victories in a way that she had just started to embrace in her own meeting. However, as she delved further into the piece, she recognized names. Programmers she had competed with, individuals she had quietly admired for their status and skills, now lauded for their paths to success. It set off a flood of emotions. Envy mixed with admiration and a tinge of self-doubt. Could she ever reach such heights? And was she fundamentally missing something in her own journey by merely discovering her voice? The realization struck hard. Emily had just started to share her own vulnerabilities, yet some of these women had already crafted entire narratives publicly, stories that resonated deeply within the industry and won accolades. The article wasn't just a celebration of their success but showcased how their hesitance had been transformed into stepping stones. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. This wasn't merely a light of inspiration. It felt more like a call to action. Who better to narrate a story of transformation than someone who was just beginning to experiment with her own? She pictured her meeting from just a few hours ago, the warmth and openness cropping up around her. What if she was not just a participant but the central figure in her own story? This radical shift in perspective ignited a flicker of determination. In the days ahead, she could pen her own narrative, capturing the struggles she faced, the fears she had conquered, and the authentic connections she built. Suddenly, she envisioned not just publishing an article but leading a movement within her workspace that emphasized comfort in vulnerability and awe in growth. Driven by this newfound vision, Emily drafted an outline for her own article. What would she focus on? She wanted to capture the importance of vulnerability, yes, but more than that, she wanted to explore the strength that arose from that space. She considered how to frame her recent meeting as part of her evolution, weaving in lessons, raw moments, and the reality that openness doesn't always equate to weak. But there was still Jack's underlying skepticism woven into her thoughts, a reminder of the critical eye she had battled during that meeting. Would he be her first reader, an amicable ally, or an unwitting antagonist to her narrative? The thought sent a wave of uncertainty crashing down around her. She had witnessed how Jack's initial doubts transformed into interest, but could that spark option ventilation to her unfolding story? Each idea came with its own entanglements, a web she could almost see spinning around her mind. But hesitation had no place in this new endeavor. She thought of the connections she had fostered just hours before. Each person had shared a piece of themselves, raw truths woven through their experiences. With renewed determination, she stepped away from her laptop, grabbed a notepad, and started jotting down snippets of her own journey and reflections, focusing on the key takeaways she had gathered from her meeting and the inspiration she felt from the 9 featured in the article. Yet, as the layout of her potential piece swirled in her mind, a chilling prospect emerged. What if she was not ready? What if her own story fell flat against the sheer brilliance of those who had come before her? Emily's heart raced as her inner conflict enveloped her. With a tentative hand, she reached for her phone, ready to reach out to Jack, eager for his feedback. But then she hesitated. Was it his approval she sought? Or was it to rid herself of the heightened anxiety that came from embarking on this new journey? The line between external validation and internal discovery began to blur as she stood at this crossroads. She grasped the dawning truth. The true challenge lay ahead, not merely in sharing her story, but in facing her own fears of inadequacy and the judgment of others. With both excitement and trepidation coursing through her, Emily knew this was more than discovery. It was a profound reckoning. But before she could execute her thoughts into words, a new email notification flashed, this time indicating a response from Jack. The moment of truth was upon her. His words could shift everything. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she opened Jack's email. Would it be a nod of encouragement or a critical dissection of her aspirations? The screen glared back at her, the cursor blinking impatiently as she took a deep breath and clicked to reveal his response. Emily, I have to admit I was surprised by your insights in the meeting. I've noticed a shift in your approach and it's impressive. I think your ideas on vulnerability could resonate with others. Have you considered how you would like to frame your narrative? A wave of relief washed over her, but a shadow of uncertainty still lingered. Jack's support was invigorating, yet it raised an insistent question. Was she ready to be open, to share her fears and dreams? She felt both empowered and exposed. The response sparked motivation, but also ignited an internal dialogue bursting with doubts. What if her story didn't matter? What if her reflections on vulnerability were seen as trivial, mere whispers against the thunder of established achievements? She could feel the weight of comparisons settling over her like a damp cloak. Was she simply another voice trying to stake a claim on a stage already dominated by others? Pushed by a mix of desire and trepidation, she began drafting her narrative. Each word felt heavy with expectation. She wanted to articulate what it meant to balance ambition with the fear of failure, to walk that fine line between vulnerability and strength. But with every sentence she typed, doubts danced like shadows at the edges of her thoughts. Trying to shake off the uncertainty, Emily turned back to her notes, highlighting key snippets, moments from her life that could serve as safe harbors for readers grappling with their own choices. Deepening her introspection became essential. She recalled a time in college when she hesitated to present a project, terrified of what peers would think. The similar anxiety crept back now, as she prepared to expose these layers of her past. The vulnerability she wished to portray felt like a double-edged sword. What if it cut too deep? Perhaps it was time to confront her inner critics head-on. Amid her mind's chaos, she jotted down thoughts about her experience presenting the project, the fear that loomed large, and how she eventually claimed the space she needed to articulate her thoughts. As she penned this down, an unexpected revelation struck her. The act of pushing through discomfort that was her story. Jack's words echoed in her heart. A shift in your approach. This shift had to transform from just an aspiration into action. After the first draft, she summoned the courage to ask him for a follow-up discussion. Courage did not always feel like a loud proclamation. Sometimes, it was the quiet resolution to face a fear, to voice her needs, to seek guidance. She typed out her request for a discussion. A mix of excitement and anxiety surged within her. What would he say? Would he share further insights, or would he challenge her ideas? Just as she clicked send, a new layer of doubt slipped in. What if he found her naive, her narrative oversimplified? What if they merely saw her as a footnote in a rich tapestry of stories? Each fresh doubt built upon another, creating a storm of apprehension around her developing story. But that was the point, wasn't it? She needed to trust herself and embrace this moment of vulnerability. The decision lay before her, whether to let fear silence her or allow it to fuel her journey. Emily sat back, taking a deep breath, reminding herself that every successful figure navigated storms of doubt to plant the seeds of their success. Now fully aware this was more than crafting an article, it was a journey of self-discovery. As she reflected on this transformation, another email notification chimed. The subject line read, "Let us set a time to discuss your ideas." Her stomach dropped as the new wave of anticipation surged through her. This was not just a conversation. It was a pivotal moment she'd spent weeks building toward. The time had come to face not only her narrative but the deeper fears she was beginning to understand. Would she emerge stronger? Or would the conversation reveal cracks she hadn't seen before? The impending dialogue loomed large, promising clarity or perhaps a confrontation with her greatest insecurities. Emily settled into her chair, the unfamiliar comfort of anticipation mixed with apprehension swirling in her chest. Today marked a turning point not just in framing her narrative but in confronting the shadows of her self-doubt head-on. As the clock ticked down to her scheduled meeting with Jack, every heartbeat echoed her resolve to not only share her journey, but to embrace the spectacular messiness of it all. When Jack's image filled the screen, he greeted her with a warm smile, an easy demeanor that immediately set the stage for productive dialogue. "Hey, Emily," he said. "I'm excited to talk about your ideas." Her voice trembled slightly as she reciprocated the greeting, but she quickly grounded herself. This was her moment, a chance to assert her identity and the significance of her story. They began discussing her experiences, a weaving of vulnerability with courage. She articulated how her journey from being a mere delivery girl at Macrotech to stepping into an advocacy role melded both her dreams and her fears. Jack listened intently, and as she spoke, she noticed the subtle shift in his expressions from skepticism to curiosity. Unlike before, she wasn't merely regurgitating industry jargon. She was revealing her authenticity, a tapestry of raw emotions and unyielding aspiration. With every shared anecdote about her meetings, the programmer's struggles, and the transformative discussions they had fostered, she uncovered layers of boldness that had long been dormant. "Your story is compelling, Emily," Jack remarked, his tone sincere. "You're building a bridge between your experiences and the community. That's powerful." His validation unfurled a blanket of relief over her, yet a deeper hunger for understanding still flickered in her chest. "But Jack," she added, "what if they perceive my story as trivial? Or worse, what if they see me as an imposter in the realm I wish to speak for?" Jack leaned in, confidence radiating from him. "Imposter syndrome is common. Every successful person grapples with it. Remember, your perspective is valid and valuable. Speaking out is the first step toward authenticity. You're not just sharing facts. You're inviting others into your world, showing them they aren't alone." His words resonated deeply. Emily's journey was not a comparison to others. It was a testament to her resilience. In that moment, she realized her struggles, feelings, and triumphs mattered. They were crucial. Her story, accompanied by the experiences of the 9 programmers who had inspired her, could illuminate hidden truths in the tech industry. When the meeting drew to a close, Emily felt an exhilarating surge of confidence. They had not just discussed strategies. She had empowered herself to embrace her story with its complexities and nuances. She looked forward to solidifying her article but was now determined to include the voices of her fellow programmers. Every bit of their shared vulnerability would resonate in her writing. Over the next few days, she meticulously crafted her narrative, weaving her experiences together with those of the programmers who had joined her discussions. As she typed, something remarkable happened. Each word became a step through the discomfort she had long feared. The story took shape, interlacing threads of vulnerability, connection, and empowerment. Upon completion, Emily felt alive with purpose. She stared at the screen. Here lay the manifestation of her growth, no longer just a delivery girl but a voice for change and courage. Possibilities cascaded before her as she clicked to send her article to the industry publication. This was a moment she had long dreamed of, and she embraced it fully. Days later, as she observed her inbox light up with notifications from readers, her heart raced. Comments poured in, some reflecting gratitude, others sharing their own stories of struggle. Jack's encouraging note buoyed her spirit, providing affirmation that her voice mattered. As weeks unfolded, Emily transitioned from hesitant dreams into a position of influence, facilitating roundtable discussions, celebrating the strength of vulnerability among tech professionals. The anxiety of her initial ascent dissipated, replaced by newfound confidence and recognition within her community. Her authentic portrayal of fears alongside triumphs became a beacon for others who yearned to be seen and heard. In this metamorphosis, Emily discovered her true calling, not only advocating for others but becoming a source of inspiration and empowerment through the very act of sharing her own narrative. Standing before a group of programmers, she would no longer feel diminished by doubt. Rather, she stood proud, embodying the voice that had once trembled in uncertainty. Through her tenacity, Emily had achieved not just professional recognition but a profound personal triumph. She conquered her fears, transformed them into a guiding force, and in doing so, validated the importance of sharing her journey. Now, a voice firmly established, she understood the power in being unapologetically herself. This was the space she fought for, an empowered individual unafraid to champion the cause of both herself and her community. Her experience was far from a singular endeavor. It was the driving force that fueled her to reach for more, to endlessly advocate for those still confined to silence. Armed with confidence, clarity, and the realization that her story was an integral part of a broader narrative, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. This was the moment she had been assembling, stepping boldly into her identity and inspiring others to do the same. And as she continued to write, advocate, and share her voice, Emily vowed never to shy away from the power of her narrative. There was endless potential ahead. And now, you need to subscribe immediately to this channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive emotional stories that will fuel your own personal growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for Journeys of Transformation. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this conclusion. Every voice matters. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring resolution. Don't wait even one more second to spread the light of personal overcoming stories.